Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drayhon, and welcome back to another Dungeons & Dragons character concept video. In this series, I go over the different races of Dungeons & Dragons, and show you what type of characters you can build just by looking into the lore of those races. Now, I hope you enjoyed the 4th of July special that I did, where I took a look at a concept for a paladin for the United States of America. It was definitely an intriguing concept, and I definitely enjoyed doing it, as stereotyped as it was. Anyway, we are taking a look at the race known as the Gnomes for this video. And honestly, I really like the Gnomes, specifically the Rock Gnome subrace, because of how intriguing their hobbies are. I myself am an inventor and like to create, just like the Rock Gnomes. Though, sadly, I am not one. But I do have a good idea for a character for a Rock Gnome, which actually uses one of the concepts that I will be talking about today. Anyway, I'm blabbering again. Let's get into this concept video. The subraces for the gnomes are forest gnomes, rock gnomes, deep gnomes, also known as, let's see if I can pronounce this without butchering it, Snirfniblin, and the Mark of Scribing gnomes found in Eberron. For backgrounds that would probably fit a gnome character, entertainer, clan crafter, as for the feature that the clan crafter provides, hermit and outlander seem to fit the gnomes the best. For classes, I would say that Druid, Wizard, Artificer, and Bard are the closest things you can get to a gnome character. Now, you don't have to do this as a PC build. You can also use this for NPCs, Dungeon Masters, in case you're running low on time and need some generic NPCs for your campaign, or just for a simple encounter. Now, there is a video out there, I think it's on the Dungeons & Dragons Beyond channel, where they go over the concepts of the gnome Ceremorph and the gnome Squidlings as a playable character using the Dhampir custom lineage on top of one of the gnomes. Now, personally, the rock gnome best fits the gnome Ceremorph, while the forest gnome would fit the Squidling. As for the deep gnome, I would highly advise not using a deep gnome for a Ceremorph type build, because that creates the Illithidae known as the Mosgricken. And those really aren't playable, since they're more animalistic in nature. You're going to have to look that one up if you want to know more info. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the rest of this video. I'm going to repeat myself a couple of times with this. By seeing what subclasses we should be using for our gnome characters. Alright, we'll go ahead and start off with the obvious one, and that is the Artificer. Rock gnomes, and especially deep gnomes, would best fit any of the specialists. But for a Mark of Scribing gnome, they would best fit only 3. The Maverick, the Forge Adept, and the Artillerist Specialist. For Bard, the Mark of Scribing Gnome would best fit the College of Lore, while the Forest Gnome, those stupid hippies, would best fit the colleges of the Lore and Maestro. For Druid, the main one you're going to be using for a Druid is going to be the Forest Gnome because of their tree-hugging nature. I don't understand tree huggers. Anyway, Forest Gnomes are going to be using the Circle of Land, mostly the forest and the grasslands, the Circle of Spores, Dreams, Moon, and Shepherd. Rock Gnomes are best used for the Circle of the Land and Circle of the Forge, while Deep Gnome will be using Circle of the Land, Underdark, and Circle of Spores because of their Underdark nature. Moving on towards Wizards, any gnome you make would probably go with either the arcane tradition of illusion or necromancy. Now, the mark of scribing gnomes, wouldn't you guess, would most likely use the Order of Scribes or the Unearthed Arcana's Lore Mastery arcane tradition. Rock gnomes would have the arcane tradition of Invention, which is Unearthed Arcana, Technomancy, also Unearthed Arcana, and Chronergy. Though why anybody would be using magic that manipulates the fabric of time, I don't know. Forest Gnomes would also be using the Lore Mastery arcane tradition from Unearthed Arcana, but also Enchantment. Now the Sniffniblin, or Deep Gnome, would be using Transmutation and War Magic. For your Sorcerers, the Sorceress origin of Wild Magic would best fit the Forest Gnome. Rock Gnomes would probably take up the Sorceress origin of Stone, which is Unearthed Arcana. Deep Gnomes would also take up the Stone origins, but they would also take up Runechild and Aberrant Mind. That's because of their ties with the Illithids, or Mind Flayers as they're normally called. Mark of Scribing Gnomes would probably take up origins with the Clockwork Soul or the Runechild, because of the lore of Eberron. For fighters, there are not as many gnomes that would probably take up a fighting style, but rock gnomes would definitely be taking up either the renegade or the gunslinger for the most part, and Echo Knight would definitely be a close second. Once again, the time manipulation is kind of iffy there, but I can see a rock gnome doing something similar. For the forest gnomes, they're going to mostly use sharpshooters or scouts, both Unearthed Arcana archetypes. For deep gnomes, once again going off of the fact that they are very close to Mind Flayer colonies and have some ties to them, the Psy Warrior is going to be your best bet. Moving on to Rogue. Just about every single gnome you make is probably going to have the Arcane Trickster Rogue. But if you want a little more diversity, the Forest Gnome would take up the Scout archetype. Deep Gnomes would probably take up Soul Knife for more psionic options, while the Mark of Scribing Gnome would take up either the Inquisitive or the Mastermind archetypes. For Ranger, and that'll be our last one for today, is going to either be the Forest Gnome, which will take on the conclaves of the Fey Wanderer, Beastmaster, or Swarmkeeper, because of their ties to the Fey. For the Deep Gnome, either the Gloomstalker or the Beastmaster conclaves. Well, I've run out of time, viewers. I do hope you enjoyed, and I do hope Until next time, dear viewers, this has been Drehorn, and I am offline.